Sunshine Law Act 175 of 1974. Any attempt to do that, which clearly in this, there's a lot of attempts to do it, is not going to go well for the board or the district at large. I see in the future, if this is pushed, that there will be lawsuits. I can almost guarantee you there will be lawsuits,
Yep.
which is going to be quite costly for the district, considering they're worried about other political stuff, as I've been well aware of. So my point is, you have several sections in here where you actually say the individual controlling the publication of reported information accepts all potential legal liability. All right. Publish, share, number 5A, publish, share information that harms the reputation of another person, group, or organization, or inflicts emotional stress upon another person. Well, here's my deal with that statement. You're not protecting me as a board member when people come to this podium and do the same thing. They've been doing it since December 4th. No one said a word. There's been slander. There's been bad talk. There's been all kinds of accusations, and this board's done nothing. So, you talk about potential legal liability. There you go. Publish and share private or personal information about someone without their permission. The board's done that too, I noticed. And when I get into use of recording devices, no recording shall take place outside of the board or committee meeting room. Well, that's not going to work. Public parking lots, public egress area, everything's public, so that's not going to go over well. No public broadcasting. Now, I don't see anybody in here public broadcasting at this point. But if you go to a football game or a basketball game, which I've attended, I've seen people broadcasting those events live on Facebook. And you're not stopping that, nor are you going to stop it. And then I'm going to get into the recording may not begin until the meeting is officially called to order. No, that's not going to happen. And may not continue after the meeting concludes. No recording may take place during recesses or breaks. That's not going to happen either. Request termination of the recording. Request the assistance of security or law enforcement officers to remove a disorderly person when the person's conduct interferes with the orderly progress of the meeting. These recordings that have been used since December 4th have not interrupted anything. And removing somebody from a meeting, we saw what happened in Virginia to the fellow when they tried to remove him over comments he was making about his raped daughter. You people are out of control thinking you can control the transparency in this room. That's not your job. You're supposed to be transparent. You're not transparent. And I appreciate you allowing me to speak tonight. And you'll have a good evening. Thank you.
Moving on. Dr. Naylor, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
This evening, I'd just like to share with you our emergency operations plan, which is a document that Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency provides as a template to help and assist school districts in planning for emergencies. So it's a rather large document. I did not write the document. Professionals from the federal and state level provide this template for us to utilize as a framework. So it's a framework for us as a district to plan for potential school incidents, and whether they are hazards or incidents that occur due to weather and natural scenarios. It brings a framework for the district to plan with, and then as well, that then works its way down to the building level. So if you think of a larger district that has different characteristics in our campus setting, I might be 5 miles away from another school with different areas that I need to plan for from an emergency standpoint. So as we look through this document on page 3, we did a hazard analysis summary to identify hazards that we should be planning for. So we don't necessarily have a railroad station or tracks near a school, so we wouldn't necessarily plan for an emergency with a railway and things of that nature. So we try and plan for those situations and scenarios that might obviously be something that we're faced with. So looking at those priority hazards then, as a district, we then plan for those specific hazards and look at each building and unique characteristics around each building that we need to plan for, and then create those annexes. There are some functional annexes that are consistent across the district. Communication, from a district standpoint, an emergency situation would be consistent across all the buildings, for example. Our evacuation procedures are consistent across all buildings, so those functions are consistent. Being on a campus as well, a lot of our annexes are very similar because we're situated in the same area, and we might be utilizing some of our common facilities around the campus. But page 4 gives you just a highlighted overview of the different hazards we're planning for. Page 19 speaks to incident command and the situation that might occur. Who is the incident commander? And looking through that process from an organizational standpoint, how you might structure and support a building in an emergency situation. So it speaks to incident commander and operations, and logistics, and the financial pieces that might go into an extended emergency, and those roles associated with those specific highlighted areas. So incident command is obviously a national structure. We bring that in-house as well so that we can coordinate with other local agencies and have an understanding of what that means. Because obviously in an emergency situation, you're coordinating with the local fire, EMS, state, so having that common language from an incident command structure and support helps in that time of need. So the plan speaks to that to help build that knowledge base as to what those structures are with our admin team, and you'll see that highlighted throughout the document. Page 26 speaks to approval and dissemination of the plan. That's what we're talking about tonight. This is not a new plan. This has been in place here at Littlestown, but it needs to be formalized as well. Just like we would for building a student handbook, this is as important as a student handbook for each building. So that's why you're seeing that here at the start of the school year, and us obviously taking a look at this guiding document that our admin team provides. Obviously, there's an annual review of the plan, and it speaks to that being more incorporated into our practices, as well training and exercising. So it's a good guiding document for our admin team, as well as our staff and the public to understand what we have in place. From that goes a lot more detail with regards to planning that occurs with our admin, teachers, and staff for specific hazards that we might encounter. Any questions?
I know you can't go into detail, but is there a plan, or do you guys put within not only the written form but practicality so that we kind of run through some scenarios, see how communication is working with different agencies,
campus and building practice some of those annexes, whether that's evacuation or reverse evacuation or situations where you have to hold in a building from that perspective. One of the areas I think from a growth standpoint that we need to look at is the EMS services and coordinating those services. We do a nice job every 2 years of bringing those departments into the district and walking the district and having an understanding. We haven't taken it to a point where we've actually done a scenario-based tabletop, and that's something that I definitely want to start incorporating into our practices. It's something we're talking about for sure.
Any other questions for Dr. Naylor? Thank you very much for being here to present this. Next, another special guest. Both happen to be my middle school principals.
Got a band back together.
Yeah, but Ms. Courtney Golden.
Well, hello, everyone. So I come to you tonight to talk to you about Maple Avenue's TSI plan for the coming year, which stands for Target Support and Improvement Plan. So this TSI designation comes from the state Department of Education to schools who have groups of students who fall below the state established standards. Okay, so that's how we receive the designation. The state recognizes these as target areas for growth. Now, there's different levels of plans that schools can be put on. The TSI is just that first level of alert to say, hey, we've noticed you have a group of students in your building who aren't doing as well as the rest. Let's put a plan together to make sure that this slipping doesn't continue and you don't end up on some sort of corrective action plan. So you may be familiar with Dr. Vincent talking about the comprehensive planning process, for months and months, how long that takes, and the process involved. This is a very similar process to that. And groups involved within your school building to revisit your school's vision, to look at the data, and it takes you through a very similar template if you were involved with working through that with Dr. Mitchell, to kind of distill the data and decide where is it that you need to focus. Now, the clever thing is, if you do it right, follow all the steps, it will boil it down to you noticing that slippage that they noticed, and that's why you're being targeted as TSI designation. So for us, here I was suspenseful, you're wondering, what is it like, right? We were given that the TSI for our special education population in the areas of growth and achievement for math and reading, and our special ed population for attendance. So with that, as we looked at the data, we realized, oh, hey, yes, they're right. These populations were not doing as well as their peers in those areas. And that we need to come up with some goals and some bench post metrics to help us make sure that we are making growth in these areas. While we do have to set some specific metrics for these goals, because it is kind of that early warning level, we do not need to report back to the state at the end to say, ta-da, here's how we did. The language that they use is, it is not tied to state-defined exit criteria. Improved student performance in designated areas may result in a positive change in designation. So basically, what I've been saying to you for the past year or so, what you focus on improves. That's what they're hoping. That once they bring it to your attention, you create goals around it, and you, with fidelity, follow the plan that you've created. They hope that that's enough to bring it to the forefront, that improves the situation, and that they begin to perform like their peers. So I will share with you that we created 2 goals, with one being academic growth and achievement. We're talking about approximately 50 students in Maple Avenue who are considered students with disabilities, okay? And last year, not the year we just came off of, but the previous year when we were put into this designation, 15% of those students were proficient in LA, 5% of those students were proficient in math. So significantly below their peers, with a 65% attendance rate for our students with disabilities. So you can see very clearly, right, why that was the area the state purpose tonight is to share our goals with you, share this plan with you, kind of help you to understand what the action steps will be around those goals, and then of course, to seek your approval for this plan, which is required. Okay, so I made a one-page kind of handout for you that briefly summarizes, really 30,000-foot view of what the two goals are. The first one is restructuring how we provide learning support services to increase growth and achievement. 20% of learning support students will demonstrate proficiency on math and ELA. So you might say, well, you told me 15% of them were proficient in ELA. That's not a huge jump to 20%. But please remember 5% of them are proficient. Okay, so we thought 20% was a good number just to use across the board. It still moves us forward in ELA, puts them much closer to their peers, and it is a very ambitious goal for them for math. So what's that look like? We are going to restructure how we provide learning support services to our students. The first thing you need to understand is how we've been providing learning supports to our students. So students who have a learning disability and have an IEP have a support period in their schedule. That is, every day they go to their support teacher, and during that time they've been working on catching up on classwork, making sure they understand what's going on, getting a jump start on their homework, and throughout the day in their courses, in their 4 core courses, math, English, science, and social studies, their learning support teachers would pop in periodically throughout those 4 courses during their day. Okay, so that's what we have been doing. So that's when I talk about changes, we're going to be divergent from what I just described. Okay, so the first thing is instructional alignment. You've also heard Dr. Mitchell talk about, and I've talked about, Dr. Graves talked about proficiency scales, right? Taking those state standards, understanding what students need to be able to know and do, what are our priorities, looking at those. Our math and reading departments are the furthest along in that process than any of our other departments, and they are kind of in the implementation phase this year, meaning they're going to be using those proficiency scales to direct the teaching and learning that's in their classroom. So that aligns really nicely with this plan because it's in math and reading, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. It's going to help us to monitor what our students know and don't know, and help us to pivot and tailor instruction. We also have that iReady diagnostic assessment coming. That's going to help us for all students, but specifically here we're talking at special education students, to make sure that we personalize learning for them, that we are able to more closely monitor their progress, and really focus on small group instruction. I mean, really think about an elementary school classroom, a teacher pulling a small group to a kidney bean-shaped table, and that group doing something different because that's what they need. So being able to do that at the secondary level with the data from the iReady diagnostic, and the lessons and materials and resources are provided there as well to support teachers, which is nice. Next, I mentioned structured support. So this means when I mentioned that the learning support teachers would pop in math, science, social studies, and English classes, I mean, that's helpful. A pop in, a support, a check, how are you doing? What we're going to do now is make sure that a learning support teacher is there with those students, with the regular education students, the entire period for math and for reading. So they will be there the entire time. They will see the lesson from beginning to end. They will be there to support along the way. With that focus, it helps not spread them so thin, and they can really focus their support efforts in math and reading. The next thing would be an instructional support period. So again, when I said that our support period that is assigned to these students' schedules was for making up missed classwork or getting a jump on homework, that was all helpful logistically, but it didn't necessarily help our students to learn better or to gain more knowledge or to refine their skills. So we're making that support period an instructional time. So during this time, the support teacher can be reteaching concepts, pre-teaching concepts, reinforcing vocabulary, additional practice, application opportunities, really making sure that those students are prepared for the learning and that they're able to demonstrate what they're learning, versus it being more of what almost might look like a study hall time in a student's day. That time will also focus on instructional goal areas. Each of those students has an IEP. Each of those students has specific goals based on their learning disabilities and the areas that they're working. During that support time, that support teacher will be working with them on things to help improve those goals, those areas, versus again, just doing homework. And progress monitoring bi-weekly, and that has been our current practice. Educator accountability is the last big umbrella under that goal. When those teachers push in and co-teach in math and reading, there are strategies that are research-based, proven effective strategies for co-teaching. It's not just, I'm going to show up today and help you out. Anyone can do that, right? But we've got a highly trained learning support teacher in that room. How can they make the most of that? In addition to there being two teachers in the room, what are some strategies for personalizing learning, for pulling small groups that can be really impactful versus just another person showing up? So we're going to make sure that during the teacher's professional collaboration that we work on those strategies. We show them some strategies, they try them out, they talk with each other about them, and make sure that they're co-planning together to get the most out of that time. And maintaining high expectations for all, right? It's easy to see a student who's struggling, and maybe, I might say, maybe even human nature sometimes to want to decrease your expectation when you see a student struggling, just so that they, maybe feel really good about it. And we want them to feel really good about it, but we still have to maintain those high expectations, pushing them for achievement, at their own pace, but eventually getting them there, being good, right? Small bites at a time. The second goal is about attendance. So this is about improving attendance for learning support students so that 80% of them will be coming on a regular basis. That's up from 65%. And we're going to do that by building their confidence as a learner and promoting success at school. It's really difficult to want to come to school when you don't feel good at school and when you don't feel good about school. So helping them to feel good while they're there and feel good about the concept of school, I think, is really half the battle, getting them just eager to show up in the morning. So we're going to kind of take this in three buckets. The first one being kind of for all students, building a sense of safety, belonging, and community. Okay, that's a place that you want to be, filled with people you want to be around. So our pride meetings, our monthly theme lessons that we're going to start in social studies classes, continuing with our student recognition, our positive behavior reinforcement, and just continuing to build that community as a place that students want to be every day. The second tier, if you will, kind of reins in a little bit, not for all students, but now students who are beginning to experience truancy. Okay, so these are the students who are now accruing 3, 4, 5, 6 means habitually truant, right? So we're getting to that number of 6. 3, 4, 5 absences. What are we going to do for those students? So we want to make sure that we build strong connections with them and help them to understand that they have a person at school, a charismatic adult who cares for them and who will notice if they're missing, who will say, hey, Nick, I missed you at school yesterday. Where were you? Right? And Mrs. Bone's going to ask me about it, right? That you have a person. So this is going to look like two main things. The first thing is called lunch bunch. Now this isn't necessarily only for students who are showing truancy, but just students who need a person, where they would be assigned an adult that once a week they would have lunch with as a group. And they would talk about school, they'd talk about life, just have a connection with a small group of people and a charismatic adult. The other strategy here is we're going to be doing a check-in, check-out mentor. So a student might identify Mr. Smith is my person. I have a really great relationship with Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith may not be my teacher, he may not be my coach, but I've got a really great relationship with Mr. Smith. And he's going to check in with me first thing before homeroom, and I'm going to check out with him every day before I leave. He's going to ask me about my day, he's going to get me off to a good start, just things to get students motivated. The third tier, if you will, in the attendance goal has to do with our SAFE process. So that's a student attendance improvement plan, and that is a required step from schools when students are habitually truant. So we are required to meet with families and the school team to complete a SAFE where we come up with a plan to help combat that truancy. And then after that plan, we can move forward with referrals to children and youth or complaints to the magistrate, but we have to do that SAFE. That is a required piece. So what I want to do with that is just make it more intentional, because it very easily can be a compliance checkbox. Yep, we met with the family. Yep, they said they're going to set their alarm. Yep, they're going to come to school, and send the paper off. And it can be just that compliance level. Or it can really be about us digging deep, working with our school counselors to find resources to help support the family, to help us to listen better about barriers that we can remove at school to help them to come to school, right? So a prime example might be if a student is really struggling in first period math, they have a D in math, but they're always late to school and they're always missing school, and the more they're late and the more they miss school, math grade gets worse and worse and worse. We can make a schedule change and make math fourth period, right? We're not encouraging them to come late to school, but if they say that they feel better once they're there and they're settled and their mind's alert and ready and they're ready for math fourth period, those are things that we can do to help encourage them to come and feel better about their day at school. So that's what I mean when I say removing barriers to attendance. So these are all the things that we're going to be working on in the coming year, and I will keep you posted on the progress as we go, particularly there with those attendance rates and maybe some of the data we can pull from the iReady assessment about the scores for our learning support students. Questions? Okay.
Mrs. Golden, I
Yes.
had a quick question.
Certainly.
So you talked about, so right now the learning support teachers, you said, float in between all four
Yes.
core courses.
Mhm.
So you're going to be there the entire time for math and,
Yes, so they will not be going to science or social studies. Not to say that it never happened, but they're not scheduled in those classes, so they can fully focus their time on that three.
and did that impact when you guys were doing the grading student schedules this year? Like any sort of consolidation?
No, it did not change at all, the student schedules, because the way we generally schedule is, pretend there's 20 learning support students in 7th grade. 10 of them might be in this cohort, 10 of them might be in this cohort. So we would never put all 20 of them in one class together and make a learning support class. That's not, so we might take 6, 7, up to 10 of them and put them in this class with other on grade level students, same thing over here, kind of cohort A and cohort B. So if you're the 7th grade learning support teacher, cohort A is in math and cohort B is in science, and you're bopping back and forth between the two. Now you're not bopping back and forth between the two, you just get to stay in math. Same thing for English, so it doesn't affect the student schedule at all, it just allows the teacher not to bounce around so much. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mrs. Golden? All right, Dr. Menzel, you're up for a few items.
I'm up for a few, just a few. First of all, thank you to Dr. Naylor and Mrs. Golden for terrific presentations sharing emergency operations and the TSI plan. I know that they've spent much time working on both of those things. What you also have with you in packs and to the public, I believe they're in the back of the in the back of the meeting room, are the library resource lists for approval to be moved forward for ACEs, for MAMs, and for the high school. I generated a paper list to provide to the committee, and this is for your review. The LHS and MAMs are mostly ebooks that are going to be coming through as we've redesigned that high school librarian into the digital media specialist, and we're going to begin having him work through some courses at the high school and middle school this year. And ACES is mostly physical, so are there any questions regarding the resources that are provided? It is quite a list.
Wow, they have questions. This one.
All right, hearing none, I would recommend that ask that the committee give approval to move this forward to the session that's going to begin in about an hour.
Is everyone good to move this forward to the board? All right.
So knowing that, we anticipated that, that's going to be on, that will be on the board agenda. The next two items are items that we had for athletics as they were coming through. We wanted to make sure that since it is a handbook for students and a handbook for coaches that is reviewed by our CCP committee prior to full board review. If you go through them, you can see in each document as you scroll through, changes are in red. There are very few changes. I think one of the first changes in the coach's handbook was a change of the high school principal from Dr. Berryman to Dr. Becker, and there are only a few changes in the student handbook for efficiency and clarity for our students. Any questions related to the student handbook for athletics or the athletic handbook for coaches for this upcoming school year?
Hearing none, is everyone in agreement to move these forward to the board? All right.
All right, super. And we anticipated that they will be on the agenda at 6 o'clock. The last item that I have is an item to be able to share. This was brought forward as we take a look. It is the draft guidelines for recording in public meetings. We do recognize that we need to be able to put into place some reasonable rules and expectations for public meetings in the area of recording these meetings. We realize that they are for public consumption. So what I would share, as always, Mr. Lovell and I get together to review the agenda for the CCP committee. We did so in this case, and I would say that in this event, we had some late information from our solicitor, which is related to the guidelines. If you take a look at the guidelines, on the very first page, there's a very large or somewhat lengthy paragraph immediately underneath. It begins, it would be realistic, and it ends with no expectation of privacy. With comments made and suggestions made from our solicitor, we are going to recommend that we remove that paragraph. And as it is in contradiction to item 1G from the solicitor's recommendation and review, we are going to move that we remove item 1G from page 2. So those two items, I would recommend following the solicitor's advice and remove those two areas. And then I would open questions and consideration from the committee.
I'll just note that the guidelines were brought to the committee back in June, and they have now been reviewed by our solicitor, David Walker, and as well as Lee Dalton from Stock and Labor. So these have been, this was by our new lead solicitor point of contact, and I believe he's the policy specialist. So,
Okay, you're still gonna have legal problems.
are there any other questions regarding the board guidelines? Hearing none, are we in agreement to move them forward to the full board with the changes that Dr. Winslow listed? Janelle? Yes. Mary? Steve?
Yes.
All right. You had a quick one tonight.
We had a quick one tonight, that was good.
Is there any other business to be brought before the board? Dr. Bell, you have anything?
I'm good.
Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Can I have a motion? Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.